That's what happens when you get a bigger space. Everybody spreads out.
You don't want to get too close.
No. In our old center, we'd all be sitting in a space bound like that. Yeah. So now it's time. Yeah. You can actually move forward. But drag chairs up if you want. Now is the time for questions. And as we always say, any and all questions are good questions. So please feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I won't know what on earth you're interested in or what might be helpful. I can only guess so much. Yes. No.
Just a second. Sorry.
For the benefit of people who
Hello.
are streaming. There we go.
Bill, I've fallen into the habit of when I sit shamatha, I do it part of the time with my eyes closed and part of the time with my eyes open.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that. If like, should I just like stop that, break that habit? Because it, I don't know. I'm sure I do it for certain reasons, but I'm just curious what you have to say about that.
Which habit would you be breaking?
The habit of throughout a session, sometimes sitting with my eyes shut and sometimes with my eyes open.
And which one do you think it is that you should be doing?
Bill, I can barely hear you.
Yeah, well,
Well,
no. There's something funny going on with the sound system, and I'm not sure what it is. But I'll try talking like that. All right. The next person who uses the microphone is going to have to clean it off. In terms of eyes closed or eyes open, there is there's no firm rule about that. From the point of view of calm abiding practice, either one is okay. In the long run, we have a general recommendation to sit with eyes open. And the reason for that is because when we are developing calm abiding and then insight, we're not actually intending to cut ourselves off from experience. So to be able to let the mind settle in the midst of all that's arising that is important in the long run. So in the long run, being able to sit with eyes open is it's useful. It's useful. In the short term, if we find that we're very easily distracted by things that arise in the visual field, then that's fine.
yeah, I think that's what I do. It's like if I notice that I'm thinking a lot or getting distracted, I'll shut my eyes, and then if I notice then I'm getting distracted with my eyes shut, I'll open my eyes. That seems to be part of the way I'm kind of regulating it. So yeah, I was just curious what you had to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not. There's not a really. Is this one working better?
You could try. Oh, yeah, this one's better.
Or something. Yeah, it's easier to control anyway. Yeah, that's the basic thing. There's a reason for sitting with eyes open, but there are reasons that you can go ahead and close the eyes. But I think sometimes we make too much of a thing of a sort of a state that we're cultivating, as opposed to a capacity to return the attention, to notice what's going on, to return the attention. That ability to return the attention in the midst of whatever is arising is, that in the long run is more important than sort of just generating a state that feels kind of calm. That's a different kind of thing.
Kind of an obvious question. Since we have a lot of new people here, we sat for 50 minutes, so for a while. So that's that. I don't know how that felt. Was that long for people or short? But optimally, what's the kind of suggestion about how much time meditating is it useful for a person to actually practice? Do you have to do for 50? If you can do just 5 minutes or 10 minutes, is that okay? Or how do you put that into your day if you're pulled in several directions and easily distracted?
The general recommendation, many short sessions better than sporadic long ones. And there's the rationale behind that is important to get, because if we can sprinkle our day, and sprinkle, you could say, our life with more moments where we're actually in attention, where we're actually aware of what we're doing, that becomes then a habit throughout our life, throughout the day. We can have certain kinds of experiences if we can cultivate longer meditation sessions where the mind can have an opportunity to settle more deeply. But again, the ability to bring awareness into our life is that's the bigger picture. It's also easier in shorter sessions to actually maintain some kind of stability and awareness and a kind of a level of vitality that's not exhausting. It's particularly at the beginning, just sitting, even if you took out the meditation piece of it, just, my word, I guess I'm not used to sitting up straight. When can I move? Just sitting by itself is something to get used to. The mental activity of actually bringing the mind into attention and then relaxing it, but relaxing it in a way there's enough vividness so that we notice what we're doing, that takes a lot of energy too. And it's easy to get kind of tense about that over longer periods of time. So that's another reason to practice in shorter sessions, particularly at the beginning. It's almost better to restrict oneself to shorter sessions to start out with. Then it's easier to do them in a clean way, with some clarity and energy, and some sense of success too. I think that's important also. Yes.
In terms of clarity and energy, I guess I practice in the evening, 15-ish minutes, and I actually, and the idea of practicing in the morning, which people say they do, I'm like, I can't figure out how on earth I can bring clarity and energy, you know, at 6 a.m. or when my alarm goes off. I guess my question is, what's the thought about trying to bring clarity and energy in a morning practice when your brain is still extremely foggy?
You can have clarity about the fog. It sounds like a joke, but actually it's not. It does take some energy, and it is, when we're foggy, it's easier to get distracted. But it's still possible. And one of the reasons to practice when you feel sharp is that you can actually kind of settle in a little bit more. But the reasons also to practice at other times that are more challenging. Because then we have to give up on the idea that practice really will feel a certain way. It's like, oh, there I go. Or, whatever it is that, you know, that rings our chimes. But it's worth thinking about how we would practice, how we will practice at the time of death, when we're dying, when we're really seriously ill. And we're not going to be able to sort of call for a timeout and ask for our vitality and energy to come back, and for whatever fogginess to go away at that time. So it's good to do some practice when we think it's not ideal as well. But that said, that could be too frustrating. It's like we should not become masochists and only practice under the most ridiculously challenging conditions. I'll save it for when I'm in a screaming rage, then I'll try to practice. Probably won't happen in the first place, but you won't have any kind of success with it. So being able to create a good laboratory for us to be able to cultivate some practice, that's good. So if it's mainly the evening, that's fine. When you hear all the people talking about how the glories of sitting in the early hours in the morning when everything so serene and quiet and the mind is so, you don't need to feel guilty. And you also don't need to slap them either. Mm-hmm. What's that?
Kind of along with that question, I notice a lot of times in my mind throughout the day that there's thoughts of thankfulness and joy and appreciation and gratitude. But then there are dark clouds of grumpiness, pain, distress, sadness, frustration, etc. it seems easier to kind of embrace all the nice, wonderful, positive thoughts that are floating through the sunshine. But what is a skillful way to be present with distressed feelings, emotions, and reactions to all of this? Sometimes I just realize I end up crying also just because of the whole shmush of what's arising. But how do you use meditation to really confront the messiness of life, you know, and when things ain't going your way, and it's not always pleasant?
Yeah. Well, I could go back to the theme of how are you going to practice when you're dying? Because that will probably have also some messiness, some pain, frustration, anxieties, all the rest. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But one of the things to remember, and at the beginning, there are different ways to approach, but I'll tell you one part, and we can go on to some others. All the experiences that we have, whether they're the light and love side or the dark and gloomy side, these are all arising in the mind. Whether they're positive or negative or neutral, all experiences, or we take them to be that, all the experiences that arise can actually be the ground for recognizing our own pure nature. Because that's not obscured by any of them. And any of those experiences can actually be a door straight into that. In order to be able to take advantage of this, this is kind of more of a long-term project. This is not like the quick fix. This is not an aspirin kind of answer. There are some of those, but that's different. But you've been around for a while, so you should take up the challenge of looking more deeply into this. When we cultivate calm abiding, we allow the mind to settle. And when it settles, there's actually an opportunity to see more clearly into our mind, the nature of our awareness, and also the nature of experiences that arise in the stream of awareness. And over time, it's important to begin to explore the content of the moving mind, the content of these experiences, and put these under the lens of insight practice. And first we do this in the context of formal meditation with instruction, how to do that. The more we can do that, the more we can allow the attention to just go straight into the experience, drop straight into the nature of the experience without being caught in our habitual reactions, the momentum of our habitual reaction. And in that, it's actually possible for any experience, positive, negative, neutral, to actually be liberated in itself. You've been around for a while, so I'm going to push you a little bit to consider this. Along the way, it's there are different things that we can do that are more immediately accessible. And one of them is to back up to looking at things from the point of view of how any of these experiences could help us develop loving kindness and compassion. Mm-hmm. Because whenever we are lost in the doom and gloom, and saying, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. That's our mantra. I don't want it, I don't want it, I don't want it. It's possible for us to actually step back just a little bit and recognize that we're not unique in this regard. That so many beings are probably going through exactly that experience right in the moment. And then to generate a wish that that all beings actually find the way to be free in this, that they actually not be trapped. And when we shift from that self-referential perspective to opening our hearts like that, we discover a certain kind of freedom in the midst of that. It doesn't make our bum knee or the gloomy outlook for the day all of a sudden turn bright, but it does change our relationship to it. To step back even farther, one of the things that we can do is to actively cultivate positive mind states. So we're not actually going to be battling with doom and gloom just right there in the moment, but to be able to find that we can actually actively cultivate good-heartedness, actively cultivate outlooks that are very positive. And so that then becomes a kind of a backdrop antidote to the tendency to go into sort of self-fulfilling and self-accelerating loops of doom and gloom. So those are kind of three different kinds of things.
Sure, thank you. That's what I essentially did when I brought awareness to it. Is that I just noticed that I had an automatic reaction to family things, world things, and my own earth suits things. And I just noticed, distress is present. I hear frustration and overwhelm and sadness and pain all smooshed together there. And I really got to see that they're really dependent arisings they weren't there previously. They're not there all the time, and they just came to visit me. And I was like watching in the sky of awareness, watching all those states throw through. And I could, at the same point, as you mentioned, use it for all beings, because I know, so first of all, for the case with the family and friends and other people who are suffering deeply, there's my reaction is I'm very, very sad. I just want to cry. In fact, that's what I did in response to it. I realized that's an appropriate response to immense sorrowful experiences that are very difficult on family and friends whom I love and who I cannot make better. And I just see my awareness of that, and so I could do that. And then I noticed these reactions didn't stay around. They're impermanent, and they left. So I noticed that as well too, that they're not permanent they're not who I am. They're like a sky of awareness with that. And I know that the experiences I was having were, as you mentioned, many, many, many people experience at different times in their life. So I could mention that. And as a balance, because I really do appreciate Buddha's understanding of the suffering, the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. But the cool part is suffering is impermanent. The key thing that's really permanent is my own inner Buddha nature with its pristine awareness and joy and wonder and peace and vitality and friskiness. So that inner self actually is the only permanent thing that's really in my head. But this other confusion shrouds that true perception of things. And so I think that's one of the things that's the only permanent thing that's really around is my great joy that's there, that hasn't left, that's somehow covered up occasionally that I forget about.
Yeah. I think I should talk to you more about some specific insight practices relative to this. The things that you're talking about in terms of the impermanence and the contemplative pieces, those are that's a level of insight that would be connected with kind of a deconstructive approach seeing that one thing is not necessarily stuck to another. And it's that's a very useful piece of it. But it's possible to go beyond that. For another time.
Stay tuned for coming attractions.
When you first began to speak before the guided meditation, you used a description that I hadn't heard in quite the way you spoke it about what the Buddha meant, the word the Buddha meant in the Tibetan word. And I want to say what I heard, and then if you can remember what you said, I'd like you to amplify it because it seemed very helpful to me. So what I remember hearing is that the Buddha is awakened to all of the positive qualities that as human beings we're capable of, and had left behind habitual energies, habitual actions that were no longer useful. Is that sort of what you said?
Yeah, that's sort of what I said. It's actually quite close. In this case, there was a little subtle thing there, but it's not really significant in one sense. But you said the Buddha did this. I was actually saying the meaning of Buddha is right, this, okay. And that the exhaustion of all habitual tendencies and confusion.
The way it was helpful for me was it gave me both permission. Oh, that's why my habitual patterns are so difficult to let go of. So it was sort of an understanding. That's what this is all about, is a really lifelong endeavor to let go of that which is so very difficult to let go of. And it also helped arouse my compassion for myself and for all beings. That's what we're trying to do, is let go of things that it's just very hard to let go of.
Yeah, we've been practicing for lifetimes.
Lifetimes.
Yeah. From the point of view of the Bodhisattva vow, it's not just this lifetime, it's all lifetimes until we attain enlightenment, until we finally exhaust those things and all the positive qualities arise.
Thank you.
More observation than question. I realize how complex this simple sitting is today. I realized it before, but today was like strong realization how many layers there are. You know, like you let the thoughts come and go, but you actually can do something about it, but not much, just a little bit, etc., 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 etc. There are so many layers of how can this simple sitting and doing nothing be this.
Doing nothing is very complicated.
It's extremely complicated, and I felt like I have to share this moment of aha, and somehow it relates to the other thing that it has to somehow go beyond the cushion, and it goes actually into this the world around, and it came to me this how they say, those eightfolded path, right? One of it is the right vocation or the right livelihood. And when you mentioned about the waking up early morning and etc., I realized, yeah, I have to adjust the whole thing to be able to do this in like the morning, or because I'm horrible. You don't want to know, but especially in that respect. But like it's so complex, so complicated. It's not simple. That's all. I just wanted to shout it. That.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's on one hand it is very complicated, but the complication is really not being able to be simple. Yes. That's what's complicated. In the 1996 seminar with Bokar Rinpoche, when he led the Mahamudra seminar here in Portland, one of his culminating instructions in the middle of the seminar is talking about Mahamudra, and he'd gone through all these things, and he says, and then nothing to do. Nothing to do. He'd been speaking in Tibetan up to that point, and then in English he says, nothing to do, nothing to do. And it's that is the profound point there, but being able to see all the things that we do, all the complications that we engage in, that's the challenge. But in that, it's good to have a spirit of simplicity about that, because the complication only arises when we put one thing with another thing, with another thing, and then another thing, and then another thing. But at any moment, only one thing is actually coming up. And so when we say complicated, we've already gone beyond what's right in front of us. And so that the sense that we're not there yet, or it must be something else, that in that instant of that thought, we've already gone beyond. We've already made it too complicated. Yeah, it must be somewhere else. It must be something else. So that is the aspect of relaxation in calm abiding is really important. The vitality and vividness is important in order to get us to really be, actually, oh, yes, here I am. But then within that, then the relaxation is the key. Matthew. Thank you, Cynthia.
I was wondering if you could give us, if you could offer a sort of a meaning of Jine in sort of a similar manner that you offered a sort of a meaning of Sangye, because I think I really sort of struggle with this habit of complicating things, of viewing the simple as complicated, and it's very easy for me to take calm abiding at its face value and sort of interpret that very literally and get in my own way in that manner. Mm-hmm. So I feel like talking about
it actually is pretty literal. Jiwa, peaceful. Ne is place or resting. So there you have. It's actually calm abiding is. It's kind of like maybe a slightly more classy way to say rest peacefully. Just rest here. No, so it's just
It's just sort of sort of even
you could say
the thought that there's
be at peace right here. Yeah. Peace right here.
because you I really liked what you said about capacity. I think it's very easy for me to view calm abiding as kind of a state or a thing, that's something that calm abiding is a thing that I should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
That it is some kind of state, that some kind of like state of mind to like hold and kind of like keep in place,
Yeah.
rather than a capacity. And I'd like to hear a little more about sort of like Jine as a capacity.
I think you actually have a pretty good sense of it, most likely. But in terms of the capacity for resting, then it really gets down to how do you train, how do you build that, and so then we have the bringing the attention, placing the mind, and relaxing. And then when we notice we're distracted, when we're lost in that, when we're actually lost, we come back, do it again. So that's, I wish I had something really elegant, and it's kind of like you stand in front of the backboard, you throw the ball up in the air, go like that. Then you throw the ball up, and then you go like that. All day long.
So
it's too simple.
It really practice. There's really no more to say about it than just practice. That's what we're doing, is just practice.
Yeah.
It's like reminds me of like fencing. It's like you have to practice the same thrust and the same parry over and over and over and over and there's no point in counting how many times you have to do that, because it doesn't matter how many times you do it. Just practicing is what matters.
Yeah. And you relax into it. And like Vicky was saying, it's like you have to kind of give yourself permission to acknowledge how many lifetimes, even if you want to go Buddhist on it, how many lifetimes we've been cultivating something else. So it's okay. Then we just keep going, keep going.
Thank you.
Just thinking about a few things that this reminds me of. The teachings of how the Buddha really just used his own body, his own mind. He just recognized what was there. And I remember also in the summer, Khenpo Rinpoche saying, you don't need to go get something. You don't need to create something. So it's so interesting, isn't it, that we, like you say, the complications. And I feel like part of it is, and then that was making me think of what the layers that you mentioned, and how sometimes I can have the sense of there's the one thing to let go of, and and then apply a little more relaxation, and then there's another thing, but we don't, and the nothing to do. I mean, the amazing thing is, it's stopping doing some things that are very, increasingly subtle. There's some big things we can sort of see that we're doing, but I think as we can really settle more, there's just more and more subtle things we can let go of. But it's amazing that the idea that we don't need anything else to do it. It's amazing.
The nothing to do also, it can sound like you need to stop, really stop. Whatever's arising, stop the doom and gloom, or stop whatever's arising. But that's not the nothing to do. The stopping is doing. The stopping is doing. So we want to, particularly the things that we don't want, the doom and gloom, or whatever it is. We want to figure out a way to stop that. But to actually go deeply into it, the nothing to do is a very, very subtle relationship with exactly what's arising without any modification whatsoever.
So, Bill, does that mean arising and just notice? And as I'm saying that, I'm almost thinking that just bringing awareness is doing too much? And is it getting so subtle that it's just being aware?
At this point, I think it's probably not useful to talk more about it, because it starts to get into kind of ways you start to become an artist in ways to talk about it, and which is so it's more simple. But the what you describe in terms of bringing awareness to, that is definitely a first step, a necessary step along the line. But it becomes a more subtle it gets more and more subtle. So, but there's nothing wrong with saying, yeah, bring awareness to it. It's good. It'll unfold from there, as long as we don't do nothing.
Thanks for doing this. This has been good. I'm just curious about two things. One, how do you breathe when you do meditation? And then two, if you are keeping your eyes open, what kinds of visual tools might you use?
What kind of?
Visual tools.
Oh. In different kinds of traditions, you'll find different approaches to breathing. But with calm abiding, to kind of push the nothing to do a little bit farther here, it's a come as you are party with your breath. It's just whatever it's doing. And very often though we go, well, I've never paid attention to my breath. And then we can start to get into all kinds of complications about it. But it's just basically there isn't a right breath. So that's one thing. In terms of the gaze, the way our eyes and our visual consciousness and our mind usually work is we kind of that, and then there's the story about it, and then it's going to go this. We're kind of flitting around. So allowing the gaze just to come to rest, and then sometimes the suggestion is to let the eyes be just slightly closed, so we can relax the ego eye tendency, to relax that. Sometimes there's a suggestion of soft focus, not getting really tightly focused on things. I've found in the long run that one of the things that I've relied on is just treating the visual field. It's just the visual field. It's not kind of getting lost kind of within it, kind of dancing around within it. It's just, I have a visual field. The same way sounds arise. I don't try to kind of connect with one or the other, start or stop like that. It's just a visual field. Relax with it. But at the beginning, again, just like the breathing, it's like, my goodness, I never noticed my breathing. It's like, ooh, I'm sitting here, my eyes are open. What do I do? Then we start making up things, more complicated things to do, and then just being able to relax the gaze. And if we lower the gaze slightly, it can be helpful, as opposed to. So those are the general kinds of things. Tora, do you have anything else to add?
Just remembering that Ken says the point is to not be upset and not be distracted by your vision, in terms of not, you don't make something of it. It's, the idea is to kind of just let it be and forget about it. In a way, I don't forget about it's the right way, but word, but
Forget about it.
to just not make it into something special. But all those things you said, I think, are the point.
Now I'll complicate matters. You can actually use an object in the visual field as a reference for karma binding. So that's one of the principles in karma binding, is you can use just the openness of awareness in just rest with whatever's arising. For many people that's more challenging. But you can use any aspect of experience as a place to rest the attention. So you could just have your cup in front like that, and you just rest your attention on that. When I found it helpful doing that because I realized I had this very pervasive, subtle concept. Of course, it's just going to sit there. It's not going anywhere. You know, it doesn't matter if I look at it or not. It doesn't matter. And I thought, actually, I need to just rest my attention on it as though I needed to be aware that it might move at any moment. And all my job is solely to be present so that I would really be able to say, it moved. Of course, it's not going to move, but to have that kind of presence and relationship with it. But that's kind of a sidetrack. So. One more.
It might be too long of a question.
Well, let's see. Talk fast.
Okay. The allure of suffering.
The
Why?
allure of suffering.
Yes. why is it so tasty and why is it so, maybe it's just me.
The suffering, the actual unpleasantness itself,
Sure, yeah,
as
there
like, why are we attracted to
Yes.
look at it?
yeah.
Because it
Or-
is unpleasant.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, we pay attention to things.
Mm.
We pay attention to things and we make stories out of things. And there could be several dimensions to your question. But just in terms of just the basic raw experience of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, there are things that we do when the mind stream notes pleasant. There are things that we do when the mind stream notes unpleasant. And so that's kind of our being caught back and forth in that ping pong game. And then there's sort of neutral stuff, which we can actually have a slight aversion to. It's kind of like, you're in my way. I need to pay attention to things that I like and I don't like. So stop being so boring. Get out of the way. But we can actually have patterns where we spiral into negative mind states, and we're sort of that's more a matter. That side of it's more a matter of how we create our own identity. And I have my style. Then I kind of like it just okay. I'm a person who suffers like this. There's a certain kind of relief in it. Like I don't have to worry about it now. I know I'm a person who suffers like this. So okay, I'm just going to go about suffering like that. So I think that one when I actually don't know that I understand your question, but when you used the word allure, that was the side that came to mind. That was sort of that we're attracted to anything that we can somehow make workable. And if our style of getting something workable involves having a pattern of suffering and confusion, then we can be attracted to that. If there's more, you can ask some other time or later. Next week, same time, same station. Actually, since Zopa is going to be out of town, you're going to see a lot of me. So, Robert has kindly rung the bell. So, it's time to dedicate. So, we dedicate because it's easy for us to just have stuff slide off. And it's important to collect our attention and to think whatever, and particularly if there's something in particular that you found positive or useful, to collect some energy about that and to say, I'm going to do something with that. I'm actually going to, this is my dedication, I'm going to do something with this, and it will be of benefit, not only for me, but for all beings. This virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state. Thank you all. levels are set strange? I don't think so.